Hello, welcome. We're going to start chapter 4 for Bickie's Thunder Egg. This book, just a reminder, by Bert Rhoads. Chapter 4 is titled Bickie's Soldier Coat. September was an unusually warm one that fall. In hopes of a late snow, John put off coming home. He wanted to earn another $10, and perhaps the cold weather would hold off long enough so the corn wouldn't suffer. The Ross boys, Bickie and Tommy, and their close friends Neil and Pete Whitney, played on their way to school as they scurried in and out amongst the clumps of sunflowers along the country road. At noon they played ball. The recess and after school there were games and races and wrestling matches. There was a new teacher at the Ferguson school, Miss Kitty Shrike. She looked very old to Bickie. He didn't like school. He and Tommy frolicked all in the late autumn sunshine and forgot that winter would come. It was an early morning in October, and the weather changed. Bickie and Tommy finished their breakfast of cornmeal mush and milk. They stood at the window of the kitchen room in the granary, looking out at the falling snow. The big flakes filled the corners of the panes and struck the glass. Bickie rubbed the pane with his hand to clear away the moisture on the inside. He pressed his nose against the glass. It looked cold outdoors. "Come on, boys, time to go. You'll be late if you don't hurry." Still, Bickie lingered at the window. Never in his life had he dreaded to go to school. "Grab your coat, Bickie," Mother urged. "It's going to be cold today. You'll need it." "But, Mother, I don't feel cold. I'll run. It's only a little way. Only a mile. We'll run, won't we, Tommy?" Bickie looked at his brother. No, Mother said, putting the last jelly sandwich in the dinner bucket. "No, Bickie, you will never run fast enough to keep warm on this day. You must wear that coat." Then the brown eyes grew soft and gentle. "At least it'll keep you warm, Bickie." He looked at Mother's hands, all red and wrinkled from washing so many clothes. He felt a little ashamed that he was unhappy about wearing the old coat. "Mother would get new coats for you if she could." She seemed to be reading his thoughts. "We are fortunate to have good food to eat. It's providential that the trunks were stored in the granary. Otherwise you boys wouldn't have any coats at all." She smiled at him. "We have each other. We have a dry place to live, and we have enough food to eat. We should be very thankful." But Bickie didn't feel thankful. He looked at Tommy's coat. 2 years ago it had belonged to him, and before that John had worn it. The night of the fire, Hog Smith had snatched it from the wall and thrown it out of the window with other things. It was ragged and thin, but not bright or conspicuous like the old blue coat. He brought out the despised garment from the hook along the kitchen wall where the heavy outdoor things hung. Mom buttoned the big brass buttons all the way down. It fit tight around Bickie's neck. When Daddy was living, it fit him tight all the way around. But Bickie at 9 years old, could only shuffle around in it like a pole with a heavy blue tent. It was a coat of a dashing northern soldier. Its swallowtails dragged 2 inches on the floor when Bickie wore it, even when he stretched himself to be as tall as he could. It had dragged 3 or 4 inches last spring when he wore it a couple times before the fire, but the boy found no comfort in that. "Let me cut the tails off," Mom turned Bickie around so she could see the back of the coat. "No, Mother, it looks worse that way. I saw one of the tails cut off." Bickie grabbed his knit mittens and shiny dinner bucket and hurried to overtake Tommy. The boys ran. There was no time to walk. Bickie had hoped they could get there just before the school bell rang, so the children wouldn't have time to make remarks about his coat before they emerged into the schoolroom. "Oh, look," one of the boys shouted when the 2 Ross boys came into the playground. "Look, here comes the soldier." "How are you, soldier?" Many voices took up the taunting words. They screamed at him, laughed, strutting around in military fashion. Bickie's heart sank. It would be just like last spring. The new teacher stood in the door. She'd been teaching at Ferguson's school only 1 month. Miss Kitty had a bell in her hand. She saw her lips twitch. "She wants to laugh too," he thought bitterly. Everyone wants to laugh at a boy walking to school in an old uniform coat dragging with the tails on the ground. A line formed and the pupils marched into the empty hall. Here the boys and girls took off their wraps and hung them on the hooks along the wall. Bickie was the last one in. He saw the rows of overcoats. His old one stuck out like the others, like a red comb on a white rooster. He paused a minute to feel the cloth of some of the fine clothes hanging there. He knew that he would never have such a coat for his own. Not with the fire and Hank Collins. Bickley walked to his desk. One of the boys jostled and whispered in a low voice, "Soldier, soldier." The children were all at the desk. The morning exercises would soon begin, and the first grade reading class went forward to recite. Pete Whitney, Pete's best friend, put his foot in the middle aisle and nudged Bickley's foot just enough to let him get him to look up from his old shoe. Then he looked up at Pete. Pete's red hair was tousled all around his face. His red freckles seemed to dance over his face as he grinned and made a funny face. He held up a big red onion just under his countertop. He'd been scratching and tickling the onion. Bickley remembered that their teacher, Miss Kitty, hated onions. She couldn't bear the smell, she said. Sometimes the Whitney boys would bring onion sandwiches in their lunches. Bickley knew Miss Kitty could smell this red onion of Pete's and would come looking for it. Pete must have been thinking the same thing. He motioned for Bickley to be ready to receive the onion. "Children," Miss Kitty's face drew into a scowl. "I smell onion," she sniffed it. "Which one of you has an onion?" The children looked at each other with big questioning eyes, but no one answered the question. Pete Whitney turned clear around in his seat to look at his older brother Nils, 3 desks behind him. Nils stared back at Pete with a perfectly innocent expression on his flushed face. The first grade reading class droned on. Miss Kitty was fidgeting with things on her desk. Her gray top knot wobbled a little, and the flat bow of black velvet ribbon across her throat moved up and down quite fast. Bickley remembered what Nils Whitney had told them the first day of school that fall. He explained why Miss Kitty was so thin. She never eats onions. Peter was still turning the red onion around and around in his hands, tearing off another layer of its skin and scratching it deeply with his fingernails. "I smell onion!" Miss Kitty got to her feet. With an angry look on her face, she darted towards Pete Whitney's desk. He slid as far down as he could, making himself as small as possible. The chubby lad fixed his gray eyes on the teacher's face. With his right hand, he let the onion fall to the floor. He pushed it gently, and it rolled towards Bickley's seat. Bickley caught it firmly between his feet. "Hold up your hands," the teacher commanded. He held them up instantly, and the whiff of onion was almost strangled her. She coughed and sneezed. "Take that disgusting onion out of your pocket." Miss Kitty raised her hand to give a sharp cuff to Pete's ear. He dodged the bolt. I haven't got it," Pete stammered. In pretend agony of fear, he glanced at Bickley. "Bickle Harville Ross, hold up your hands," the teacher cried. Bickley's hands, being pure and clean, were held up in great haste and passed inspection. After searching Pete's pocket and desk, the teacher went back to the first grade reading class. Then the onion was carefully rolled back again to Pete's desk, where he picked it up and once again picking at it, encouraging it to give off its strong smell. Miss Kitty glared back at him several times and finally said, "Pete, you may stay in at recess." By recess time, it was snowing so hard the children could not go outside to play. So they played Spadamount? I'm not sure what that is. And in the seats, and Ada and crosses on the blackboards. By noon, everyone sat at his desk to eat lunch. The blue coat was forgotten. Bickley hoped it would be forgotten. He ate his jam sandwiches with some relish. Still, his mind was busy trying to think of some plan of getting rid of that blue coat. Oh, he had wished it had burned up in the fire. Now, if there was some poor man that came along, he could give him his coat, or maybe he could lose his coat. It was so big and so brightly colored, it would be hard to lose it in the fields and pastures. If the schoolhouse should burn down, maybe the coat would get burned up too. Or if a flood should swell in the creek between home and the house, he could try to cross it, and the coat would be torn off him and lost in the swirling water. Or if a tornado came, like the one by Marshalltown, I could just twist the coat right off his back and carry it up in the sky, and it would never be seen again. And then he could be like the other boys, and no one would call him soldier anymore. That evening, the 4 boys walked together on their way home. Bickley and Tommy Ross with Pete and Nils Whitney. The snowfall had stopped, but a strong wind was blowing, and the boys scuffed with one another on the way. The wind picked up Bickley's cap and carried it high into the air. "It's in those weeds," Pete shouted. The boys scrambled around the drifts, but when they saw the cap was gone, The wheat patch was covered an acre of the ground, and the wind blew harder every minute. Bickley put both hands on his ears and ran all the way home. "Oh, Bickley, where's your cap?" Mother asked, as he came bursting into the door, puffing, pulling Tommy after him. "Where's your cap?" "It's lost," Bickley puffed, with a freezing feeling of deep shame. "It's lost, Mother. The wind just pulled it right off my head and carried it off in the air." He stretched his hands high to show how the wind had carried the cap off. "We hunted everywhere, but we couldn't find it. We looked, didn't we, Tommy?" Mother looked worried. "You can't go to school without a cap." She put the iron that she was using back on the hot stove and thought for a minute. "I wonder. I'll look in the big trunk, and maybe there's Grandpa's old pug hat that's still in there. It would come down over your ears and shut out the wind. I'm not going to have you catching earache this winter if I can help it." "Oh, Mother!" Bickley felt a sickness rising in his stomach. "Oh, Mother?" He followed her into the small room of the granary. "Mother, please let me wear a scarf. Just wrap my head in a scarf. Please, Mother." Mother shook her head and burrowed into the big black trunk. She pulled out a paper sack. "I think it's in here," she exclaimed with relief. She untied the sack and reached aside. "Ah, look, it's in fine shape." She drew out the big black pug hat, his crown stuffed with soft paper. "It's almost new," she said, and fitted it on Bickley's head. Tears stung the boy's eyes. There was a tight, bitter knot in his throat, and he turned and looked at Tommy, who had followed them into the room. Tommy was grinning. Bickley gripped him by the shoulder and gave him a hard pinch. Mother took hold of Bickley and turned him around before Tommy could hit him with his double fist. "Bickley," she said. Her voice was low and sad. "I know how hard it must be for you to wear the old coat and now this pug hat. It's very hard to be poor, my boy, but we will not always be so. We will work together, and we will not complain. We love each other and trust God. Is that what you want to do?" Bickley looked down at the floor and nodded his head. "I will make you a cap, but not before tomorrow morning. I have so much ironing to finish. I will have to work late tonight to get it done." And she carried the pug hat out into the kitchen. The boys followed her. Bickley felt ashamed of himself, but in his mind he could see a picture of himself walking onto the school grounds tomorrow morning with the old blue coat and the pug hat. Maybe he could pull off the hat and carry it in his hand when he got near school. He thought about it for a while and decided that would look even worse. End of chapter 4. I hope you guys enjoyed.